Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, world. Welcome once again to Tuesday Talk with Key West Lou. I am your host, Louis Patrone. Well, it's been another interesting week. Our world is in a state of controversy. Our world, the whole earth, not just things happening in the United States, but worldwide. There are whispers of war, perhaps, in many places. One prominent person that I shall discuss during this show is of the opinion that World War III has already begun. Not nice. So we're going to talk about a lot of interesting, up-to-date things. If you wish to join me in conversation, the number to call is 646-478-5731. It's on the screen in front of you, 646-478-5731. I want to start with what I consider a joke. With all due respect to President Obama, he made the comment that we're not going to have any boots on the ground when we go after ISIS. We've already started. We're doing some bombings in Iraq and into Syria. And as this war, quote-unquote, proceeds, we are going to use airstrikes, air power, and the only boots on the ground, so to speak, will be special ops there to train Iraqi and Syrians to fight. Nothing else. No boots on the ground. Well, I find this very interesting, and I'll tell you why. President Obama has lined up, last number I heard was 24 different countries to support us in this effort. They are going to provide help in defeating ISIS, and these are European nations, most of the European Union, and many Arab states. I think all of the Arab states except for Iran. The only problem is they are all going to help with airstrikes, they said, but no ground troops. Now, if the United States is not going to provide ground troops, and the European Union and the Arab states who are joining in the effort, and Great Britain are not going to provide any ground troops, who the hell's going to fight this battle on the ground? Because no war is won without ground troops. You can bomb the hell out of a nation. They don't succumb. You might beat them up, but you can't win with just airstrikes unless you're going to drop a nuclear weapon. Drop a couple of nuclear bombs and that war is over. But we are not going to do that. So how do we win? We can't win unless we have troops on the ground. Where are they going to come from? Well, I'll tell you where they're going to come from. They're going to be mercenaries, military contractors. This country has gotten into the game, and we've been doing this for many, many years now, of hiring civilian companies to provide soldiers to fight wars for us. And we don't talk about this. We had this situation in Iraq and Afghanistan. You don't hear much about it, though. But we do go to military contractors. The biggest one was called Blackwater, and they got into some embarrassing situations. So they changed their name now to Academy, A-C-A-D-E-M-I. I repeat, A-C-A-D-E-M-I, Academy. And these private military contractors will provide mercenaries to fight these battles. Now, we never hear about them. We never hear that 2,876 mercenaries have been killed thus far in such and such a war. We don't hear how many were wounded, because this is not something for the public to know. We paid money, a company provided soldiers, and that's the way it is. And we're really never going to know, because the budget to pay for these military contractors comes out of CIA monies, the CIA budget. And by law in this country, we are not entitled to know the breakdown of a CIA budget, because then if we did, we'd know about how many these military contractors, what we're paying them, how many foreign leaders we've been bribing with millions of dollars, things we're not supposed to know. At least our Congress has decreed that we're not supposed to know, and our various presidents who have signed these laws have decided the American public should not know. but they're going to use mercenaries. The mercenaries are going to come from the United States. We have found, based on experience, that these mercenaries are highly ineffective and very expensive, okay? Here are some of the numbers here. In 2008, there were 242,000 military contractor soldiers. I'm going to call them mercenaries. 242,000 mercenaries in the Middle East. Today, because we've pulled out of Iraq and we're pulling out of Afghanistan, supposedly we're going back in, as we all know, there are only 66,000 mercenaries hired and representing the United States worldwide, and only 14,000 of them are outside Afghanistan. We have 52,000 mercenaries on the American payroll, fighting like United States soldiers, fighting for the United States in Afghanistan right now. Besides, fighting, they provide security to diplomats and to other officials, especially in the airport at Baghdad and at other places in Afghanistan. They also support our troops, our special op troops, for example, that are there now. They do the cooking and those kind of tasks, okay? The State Department did a recent study, a recent audit, and the State Department itself said, without giving us specific numbers, that we are overpaying by the millions to these military contractors, by the millions, okay? Well, ICE shows up, and this is the next big meal ticket, okay, for military contractors. Remember, Eisenhower said, beware of the military-industrial complex. Well, this is one of the results. The military-industrial complex, they're providing mercenaries, soldiers. We're going to go back over 250,000 soldiers as it was in 2008. We're going to spend a lot of money, but we will be able to say to the American public, our president and our Congress, we have not lost that many men in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, because we don't have any boots on the ground. We only lost 32 men who were there helping in special ops because we don't know about the people we paid to fight and die, the mercenaries, and how many of those did die. It's sort of sneaky, isn't it? We should know these things. And if we're going to have a war, it's our boys either way you look at it. Let's do it the right way, and let's not keep it from the American public. I don't like military contractors. I don't like them providing soldiers. I don't like these big industrial complexes that make guns and machines for war. I think they have built, they own Congress. There's no question about it. They own Congress. They get billions of dollars a year. Then we overproduce. Look at all the weapons we're giving to the police department that we don't need. And our country does not come out ahead. And it isn't upfront, and it's not truthful. It's wrong. Now, let me stay with these military contractors for a second again. This is called outsourcing when we go to military contractors. We don't use our own Army, Navy, and Marines. We outsource to military vendors. Well, it's costing us right now, and this is going to be a small sum. By next year at this time, it's going to be through the roof. But right now, it's only $2.5 billion a year. That's all. Over the last 5 years, we've spent $13 billion. Most of this money has gone to 8 companies. They're big companies in this business, okay? And this is the military-industrial complex again that Eisenhower warned us against, okay? But somehow they did sneak in. They say we're saving money by using them. We're saving American lives. I don't see how. I mean, there's no way of auditing what these guys are really doing. These are American boys, in effect, going over there and fighting and dying. Again, we've got to be honest with the people. We've got to be upfront. We can't disguise the way we are doing things. Let me move over to Pope Francis. Pope Francis. He gave a talk recently in Italy this past week, okay? And he said, he's the man who said, he believes that World War III has already begun. Okay? He was visiting Italy's largest military cemetery, commemorating Italians who died in World War I. And again, he said, World War III may already have begun. The world is teetering on the edge of global conflict, but we may have already entered into it. Scary, isn't it? And if we don't stop all these wars, every place there's a war, it seems, we're going to be into a third world war. And I don't know. You know, they said the First World War was the war to end all wars, and the Second World War was going to end all wars. If we have a third world war, I really believe it will be the end of all wars, because we're going to go to nuclear weapons at some point, and we're going to demolish the earth and the people living on it. It may sound strange, but think about it. Want to go to Russia now. Russia's been screwing around over in Crimea, over in the Ukraine, lying, dishonest, not truthful, bringing nations to the brink of war, bringing peoples to the brink of war, and we've been going after them, not with soldiers, but with sanctions. You have to understand that 75% of Russia's gross income comes from oil. They got a lot of oil. They export it every place. Makes a lot of countries afraid to join in against them on these battles. Putin said the sanctions weren't going to work. Well, reports in the last couple of days indicate that Russia is teetering on a recession. The sanctions are working to a degree. How much we don't know, but the ruble, their buck, their dollar, the ruble has plunged to a record loss. You heard me, a record loss in the last couple of days. So the sanctions are working. Now, what does this mean? What's going to happen here? Well, oil's always, in the modern era, been a cause for war. Think of Japan and the United States. Japan went to war with the United States on December 7th, 1941, because we were irritated with what the Japanese were doing in China, and we were cutting off Japan's source of oil, because Japan's got nothing. They're little islands, and they have to import everything, especially oil. And we were cutting off their oil supplies with sanctions. Japan had no choice but to go to war, unless they wanted to stop the war in China, which they didn't. And we had a major conflict, World War II. Well, is this going to happen again? And is oil behind it? And these sanctions, which we have to do. If we're not going to go in and fight them in Crimea and the Ukraine, then we have to use sanctions, and we use sanctions because we don't want people to get killed. We may end up in the war of all wars. Now to Illinois. Illinois is having a hard time economically, very bad time. They don't have enough jobs. And what I want to talk about is food stamps now in the state of Illinois. Their job recovery, we're in an era of job recovery. We read about it in the paper. We hear about it on television. The economy's come back. Look at the Dow. Look at the S&P 500, the highest ever. Everybody's getting rich. The 1% are getting rich, not the 99%. I do not have to tell you that. You know it. And there is no job recovery in Illinois. I'm laughing as I say this. It's so sluggish it cannot be described. And here's an example. And right now, food stamps in the state of Illinois are up 745,000. 745,000 more people are on food stamps that were there when the recession started in 2008. Can you believe that? And we just aren't getting the post-recession jobs for some reason in the state of Illinois. There are 300,000 fewer working people in Illinois than in January 2008 when the recession started. 300,000 fewer people working, and the recession is over, we're told. Look at the economy. We're doing good. And in that 300,000, the mix comes out also, which indicates that there's 170,000 fewer payroll jobs. This is the recovery. I think they want us to believe there's a recovery, but there really isn't in this country. It's the 1%, 99%, and I'm going to say something else. I may offend some people, but it's the truth. Think about it. I believe the government, I believe corporate America influence the media, newspapers, and television so that we do not get the straight story anymore. We get what the government wants us to know and what the corporate America wants us to know. Okay, I want to stay with the debt for a while. I want to talk about the poor Americans' debt burden. It's the highest in history. The poor people in this country have the highest debt burden they've ever had in the history of the United States. The federal government conducts a survey every 3 years. It's called the Survey of Consumer Finances. It found this in their recent study. The lowest 25% in the United States owe in debt $47,000 each. The poorest 25% owe $47,000 in debt, which works out to, stay with the numbers, 156% of their pre-tax income. They owe 156% more than they make. Okay, remember, average wage in this country, many people are making $27,500 roughly. And this all works out to, okay, their net worth, whatever net worth poor people have, but it works out to $1.37 of every dollar they own of net worth. So they ain't got no net worth. They're in debt, that 37 cents extra. The other interesting thing about the numbers they came up with, look at how we know the Dow Jones again is up, the S&P 500, highest numbers ever. Everybody's making money. It's really only the 1%, maybe a little more. Well, of the lowest 25% wage earners in the United States, only 1.6% of them, not 1.6% of the whole population, 1.6% of the 25% own stock. That's all. The market went up 30% in 2013. The bottom 25% of income earners in this country didn't make 30% on any investment. So, I think it's BS we're being given. The recession isn't over. What I told you about Illinois, these numbers put out by, not me, the federal government, the Survey of Consumer Finances says it also. We're still into this recession. We are still hurting big time. I want to move over to the Ukraine now. They're fighting over there. Then they have, we're going to take 20 hours off. We're going to take 24 hours off. We're going to have a truce for 6 days, 5 weeks, whatever it works out to. Well, they're fighting over there. I have mentioned over the last 3 years about the influence of a Nazi party in many countries. There is a resurgence of Nazism. I spoke to you deeply of it in Greece based upon my several months in Greece for the last 3 years. I saw it firsthand. I saw black shirts on the street. I saw the Nazi swastika. I saw people in fear of the black shirts on the street, okay? And the government does nothing about it. The Nazi party has a fantastic resurgence in Turkey, okay? Well, they're also in the Ukraine. And there's the good guys and the bad guys in the Ukraine. The bad guys are obviously the Russians, Putin's followers. The good guys are the ones that are against these Russians coming over into Crimea and are against Putin. The good guys, a significant portion of the good guys that we're supporting with money, military equipment, special training, are members of the Nazi Party. And on their uniforms, they have swastikas and other Nazi symbols, okay? They're called freedom fighters. Now, I worry that someday we may have to fight these people. I'm talking about the Nazis in the various countries. Don't say it won't happen. Because they're anti-Semitic, okay? They stand for everything Hitler stood for. They're actually anti-Christian also. It seems everybody's anti-Christian. The Muslims are anti-Christian. The Nazis are anti-Christian, okay? We live in a crazy world. Now, we're supporting a Nazi group in the Ukraine. We're going to support Assad pretty soon in fighting ISIS, no question about it. And who the hell ever thought we'd support Assad? We were going to bomb him a year ago, remember? And then Obama backed off. The Washington Post, this past Saturday, the Washington Post, a worldwide respected newspaper, had a picture of a couple of these Ukrainian troops, the good guys, who are Nazi stormtroopers, that's what they describe themselves as, with the swastika with their Nazi symbols on their helmets and on their shoulders. And this is what I didn't like. With this picture of these soldiers in Ukrainian attire with Nazi symbols on their uniforms, described them as romantic. That's the word, quote unquote. The Washington Post described these Nazis as romantic soldiers. And the reason why is that most of them are in the age of 15. They're young kids. And they want to belong to something. And they have this thrill of belonging to an organized group, Nazi party or what have you, that's doing something and hopefully going someplace. So they are romanticists at heart. Hitler had the same kind of people. He had a youth movement. He had young soldiers. He had old soldiers. Look what they did to the world. We're going to go to Venezuela. The worst thing that ever happened to Venezuela was Hugo Chavez dying. I got to tell you something. He may have hated the United States. We didn't like him, but he ran a great Venezuela for his people. All right? I told you, I started telling you 2 years ago, they had a shortage of toilet paper in Venezuela. Now, you would assume that's a necessary commodity. You would assume that the government we have the government of Maduro now. I don't know why they have not revolted and thrown this guy out of office. But Maduro should have taken care of the problem right away and busted his ass to get more toilet paper. To this day, the shortage of toilet paper continues. People go 2 weeks without toilet paper. I'm laughing. It's a disgrace. Now, let me tell you where this paper shortage has now extended. Newspapers, the voice of the people, to let everyone know the government is terrible. The newspapers in Venezuela are going out of business. And do you know why? They got no paper to print on, okay? Would you believe that? Makes sense. Makes sense. And I'll tell you something else that's happening in Venezuela. The economy's in tough shape. Now, I'm going to talk about implants, breast implants. Venezuelan women, for some reason, more so than any other country in the world, like their breasts to be a certain way. And big percentage of them are involved with breast implants. It's considered okay. It's considered proper and the thing to do at 15 years of age to give a girl breast implants as a gift. 15 years of age. But even older women, they're concerned with how they look. Their self-esteem is at stake. So they're doing 85,000 breast implants a year till recently in Venezuela. Big business. And they import the implant from the United States because we produce the best implant. The other place that does a big business in implants is China. But nobody wants to buy them, including the people in Venezuela, because even though they're cheaper, the ones that come out of China, they don't hold up. They leak, and then the woman's got terrible problems. People don't have money in Venezuela anymore. Chavez was terrific for them, as I said, but under Maduro, they don't have any money. The economy's in terrible shape, and Maduro, the president, has put into force and effect restrictive currency controls. You can only do certain things with money. So there's no money to buy breast implants. And this makes my point. A doctor who was doing 7 breast implants a week, 7 breast implants a week, is only performing 2 a month now. Not only are the doctors not making money, the plastic surgeons, but the women are upset in Venezuela because this is a big thing for Venezuelan women. Let's talk about banks for a moment here. You've got to remember something here. The banks have gotten away with murder in this country. They gave us the recession of 2008 with the bad mortgages they made. They're still screwing millions of people in the United States. There's millions of lawsuits all across this country to foreclose on people yet, okay? They brought this country to its knees, almost put us out of business, okay, economically here. And yet, not one banker, major banker, has ever been indicted. We've been told by our own Attorney General Holder that the banks first were too big to fail, and then we were told the banks were too big to prosecute. I think that's a crock. I think we should arrest all of them and indict them, try them, and put them in jail if they're convicted for wrongdoing, and most of them are going to end up in jail, and they'll never pull this shit again. It's the only way to describe it. In the meantime, what is the government doing? The government is bringing civil actions against them if there's wrongdoing, and along the way, some of the major corporations who have done wrong are buying their way out of their problem. Citicorp paid $7 billion. J.P. Morgan last year, $13 billion. And recently, the whore of whores, Bank of America, paid $16.6 billion to make their peace with the United States government because of certain irregularities, so to speak, quote unquote. Wrongdoing, not irregularities. They committed, that brought on this recession of 2008. This is a drop in the bucket. $7 billion, $13 billion, $16.6 billion. 2 companies that are paying their CEOs $40 million a year in bonuses. These guys are making big-time money right now. This is nothing. This is spit for them to pay to buy their way out of their problem, while the 99% are still suffering, okay? They are still suffering. The banks have never paid for their financial crimes. It has come to the point where Wall Street believes it is invincible. No one can touch them. They are mighty. And let me tell you something, my friends. The mighty shall fall, and before we're done, the bank will fall. Along the way here, the banks are making more money. I talked about this last year. They're laundering Colombia drug money. They're taking it out of Mexico for them, cleaning it up, and sending it back to Mexico. And they know it's drug money they're doing it with, but they said, gee, we're not responsible. We have no obligation to ask a customer where his money came from. So they're laundering this drug money and getting it back to the Colombian drug lords, and they're getting away with that too. And they're making millions of dollars. That's the show for this week, my friends. I'm glad I could talk with you. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you must. You come back every week. The show's archived, as you know, and it's on Facebook and YouTube. And I know most of you listen to the show at one of those places. I wrote a book, The World Upside Down. Buy it on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. If you enjoy the show, you'll love the book. If you don't enjoy the show, don't buy the book. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to speaking with you again next week.